defines it as something other than the entirety of the project.
No, it says board meeting room, and all of these say board meeting room.
That's, well, because the invoice says that. I think the reality is, what the project was for, was something broader than what is stated in the executive summary.
And I don't really, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me if it was also gonna be used for board meeting and PD. It was still money that we spent and that didn't go through the procedure that we think it should have gone through. And so I wanna be honest about what we spent. I think it's important.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't dispute that we want to be clear. I think that the procedures that are in place for going forward. I think the question is, do you go back and rewrite kind of what was happening now that we are where we are and we're
Yes, because I think it's important to show some wires got crossed, and this is what actually happened. We are working really hard to be sure this doesn't happen anymore. I think that's very important.
But that was publicly stated, Liz.
Right, and this would be publicly stated too. I don't know how it's any different. If that was publicly stated without an issue, I don't understand why it's not important to say this is the final bottom line of what we did.
Well, then to me, it's a separate statement. Because this was at this time, in this moment, it was specifically trying to call out to function as a board space.
That was the question.
What I have is $206,030 from the June invoices that all say board space.
That's what the invoices say.
Yeah.
But are the invoices correct? Maybe the invoices need to be redone.
Nobody said the invoices were correct.
But maybe I am
And
saying
any of the
that,
other
right?
emails that have gotten, maybe you are saying.
But I mean, I think, well, I'm asking you is are we going to rely on the title of the invoices that are coming from a third party as saying, well, now that means that's for the board space because that's the title that's on there.
But that means that's what we actually spent more than that.
I think the question is really, as I read the paragraph, that I think unintentionally, maybe there should have been another line saying in total, the remodel costs this much. This much was for board meeting, but in total, here's what it costs. I think that's what's.
Yeah, and we were trying to respond to the question about how much was spent for the board to repair. So when we talked about it, it's like, all right, what was spent within this room that we wouldn't have done if we hadn't been moving the board meetings over there? And this was before your time on the board, so we had conversations with the board chair about that. Our executive summaries, we do 2 a year, and we don't go back and fix. They are, it's a report of what's happened and a projection of what's happening. So for your point, Liz, we've had a board meeting, we've stated publicly, talked about what we've done, we've talked about what our error was, how we've remedied it.
But I think that's the issue, is that there's still a lot of argument. There's been a lot of things on social media that we didn't spend over 200. I know. I've unfollowed everything, and I sleep a lot better when I do that. But there's been a lot of, we didn't really spend over 200,000, and so I think it's important to say, yes, we had wires got crossed here. We did spend over $200,000, and we're doing everything we can to ensure it doesn't happen again.
So probably then in our next executive summary, what we should do is have this was a point in time, and I really don't want to spend time going through our last, because if we do that, I don't really want to go back to the last 10, 11 executive summaries and say, okay, was this amount that we spent spot on? If not, we have to change it.
I don't want to go through that either.
Right.
But we did change this summary. It changed a week later.
No, a week.
Well, it was the day
It was
before.
before.
Actually.
It was the day before on the meeting. It
So
did
we
change
had-
after it was
as soon
publicly
as we got
presented.
that updated information, we gave it to you because it's like, all right, now we have this, that's a little bit more information. As Kristen said, when we're going through this process, we're working off quotes. So John isn't even sure until he gets the final quotes and see how it all mixes together. One of the things he shared with me is, he said some of the places that I went out for quotes for, they couldn't even provide what I needed to make the systems work. So there he has a quote for something that might be cheaper, but then it doesn't work.
Right.
presented at? All I remember is a statement that was being made. Was it on an agenda?
September 27th.
Yeah,
It was on
and it's in the
agenda.
minutes of the October 11th meeting.
So going forward, if you'd like to have us put something where it's, you know, Oak Park and we put out the information and rewrite it, or we can,
So because we'll get the next one in September, is that the plan?
no, they're usually in June and December.
So this one is just a fluke timing, or?
No, I think this one,
There was
because
so
it's-
much-
it wasn't, I mean, our executive summaries the December and June come essentially by department, right? So I have my area of responsibilities and you get a 2-3 page deal of this is what's happened, this is where I'm going, whatever. This one is different in that it was trying to address a series of questions at that particular time. And so it was a summary of all of us coming together, not as our independent areas of responsibility, and trying to answer, and gosh, is it like 14 pages, a summary of a bunch of questions at that time. You know, I would say it would be no different than what, you know, as we worked our way through the school closing, all of a sudden, there's a packet of information or a presentation that's to, well, even the PSEO and the different things that are going on at the high school. Like, there's something bubbles up that we do a presentation to because there's a lot of conversation about it. I would say this existed at that time because of that. Because again, there's many conversations, there's demographic conversations, there's bond fund conversations, so it's like, let's just put it all together and try to summarize everything of all of the questions that were coming from whether it be board or community at that time.
This error wasn't presented at a board meeting on agenda, is that correct? Am I understanding right?
See, this is where I struggle, I don't know. And I gotta be honest, you make me a little nervous because now I have 4 board members just,
It's open meeting.
yeah, but I understand that. And I'm just saying I get nervous that it's a me thing, but there's 4
No,
board
I'm
members.
I'm questioning because I wanna go back and look, and I don't remember this being presented, and so has it been presented on an agenda? That's my question.
It was at the September 27th meeting, it was in the board minutes of October 11th, and I, again, 2 separate things. I don't believe that at that time, the document was inaccurate. I believe the intent was to have the $83,000 specific to the board's question of what does it cost us to hold our meetings here. That said, there were mistakes made in the process, and I mean, I'll acknowledge that. I just want you to realize I'm answering 2 separate questions.
No, my question is since the acknowledgement of the mistake, has it been on an agenda at a board meeting?
In
Has
what
it been
context would,
presented,
I stated it,
So that's
what would the item be? Would it be a
being
report, would it
discussed
be
to the public or demonstrated to the public? That was my question. I don't know that it hasn't been addressed to the public.
I don't even know how
Do
you
you-
demonstrate it.
We addressed it by speaking to it, but we haven't done a big presentation on it.
Thank you,
No.
thank you. That's what I was asking.
I think I did something in the superintendent report.
So, to me, it sounds, because I get what you're saying about this isn't a live document, so how can it be addressed? Part of the question is how can it be addressed in writing, so
Mhm.
that you can put to rest, you know, all the stuff that keeps bubbling up, like here's where it is.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if we still do an FAQ page, or if there's somewhere
Something.
that you can. Because I think you're right, you weren't answering the question, but to people that don't know that there was a question, it feels like we just omitted an amount of money that was spent.
Mhm.
Yeah, we could do a FAQ, that would be fine.
Mhm.
Do you think that would
that'll help.
Yeah, I think it would help. It bothers me that this is on our website and it's not accurate. It just bothers me. So, I mean, if we can talk about it in a board meeting, I can make it an agenda item and see how the rest of the board wants to handle it. I mean, I don't wanna speak for everybody, as I know that, but, I don't think I'm the only one that.
Well, right, and I
bothers.
think to Kristen's point, it was presented how it was accurate at that time, without including how
I
much.
have a problem with that though, because these are all dated June and they all say Stillwater board work. And it's over $200,000.
I think that's the problem, is what Mark was alluding to, is when we work with vendors, it might be, you know, when we tell them we're working on something, it could be Oakland, and it could be Oakland cafeteria, and there's a number of things that are in there, and they just know that we're working at Oakland, and that's their name for it. It doesn't, we didn't ask them to break it down and say, this is for PD at Oakland, this is for the boardroom, this is, you know, we most certainly could have if we were specific about that, but they just give you a general, you know, we get something for supplies, and it's supplies for Afton Lakeland. Well, it doesn't talk about whether it's toilet paper, or it's paper, or it's cleaning supplies, or it's, you know, it's just general.
And I think that all of the things that are there were purchased to make it a board meeting. I think that they could have also been used for PD, but I think primarily they were purchased for a board meeting. I don't think they've been moved out of that room and taken anywhere else.
Because we use
So-
it almost daily for PD. I mean, like tomorrow, we're doing our emergency evacuation stuff that we've been doing, 130 people in a room. You know, we keep it for that, so we wouldn't move it. I
As
think
long as
that's-
it's used, we wouldn't move it.
No, and I'm not suggesting that it be moved. I'm saying, to me, it doesn't matter if it was spent for the boardroom or for PD. It was spent, and the total that was spent is not the total that's on this page. And that's all I have an issue about. I don't have an issue of which part of it is board, which part of it is PD. It's the total. It didn't go through the procedure. It should have, I think people know that, but I think it's important that people know what the total was, period.
Then what I'm wondering is, would, like Shelley suggests, would an explanation of, because you say, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, board use, it was renovation of a room.
One room.
And what was in the executive summary was speaking to the cost that, or trying to identify the cost that'd be required to hold board meetings there, trying to separate the total cost from, that from the total cost. So if there's a explanation of, here was the total cost spent on the room, and here's what the uses are of that room, you know, that's, maybe that's something that you said would be possible, because I think, here's what I'm concerned about a little bit, and I understand your concern, but if we just crossed out this number and replaced it with,
An accurate one.
wait a minute, a different number, that may be inaccurate, because,
But more accurate than this one.
I don't know. Well, I disagree.
But I think-
that it has to be explained what the number was spent
Right,
for.
so I think the thing here is that, like I said before, this was answering a specific question. It doesn't say that in there, which makes it challenging. It doesn't say we're answering this specific question. Had the room been developed for PD, and then a year later, we decided we're
Be
gonna
easier.
do board meetings, then we know exactly what the cost is to add our board meetings. But because it was all done at the same time, I agree that we need people need a picture of what was the total number. But I think that is the question of how much more it would have cost a board meeting room. It's just that the other isn't included in there. Had it
So
been.
I think the frequently asked question piece would go through, and the questions that you've had, we can say, you know, here's what the issue was, here what, you know, and go through the steps, here's the total cost, and you have the total cost, it's after the project is done, you know, it's not a guesstimate anymore, it's factual information.
And then I wonder if going forward on executive summaries, there can be a statement at the beginning saying this is our, you know, this kind of explain what the executive summary is, like this is a snapshot of where we're at right now.
Well, they
I
do,
did
don't
do
they?
I think I have that in Mike asked me to do a summary, which we did on our last one, so.
But I mean, that would let the public know, like this is where we are today, some of these numbers change throughout the year.
Well, I'm happy to bring it up at the next board meeting and see if that's how people wanna do it. I would prefer the executive summary be corrected. If other people would be satisfied with a frequently asked question, then we can talk about that too, so, it's fine. What about the appendix B? Is there a reason that was taken off?
I think it's probably just how it was posted through Carissa.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I have that on my list to ask.
and then the purchase procedure form,